I want to talk about my favorite chapter, chapter 9. Yes, because that's a chapter where I'm most sarcastic, speaking about the atheist. Yes, it was a lot of fun. So I look at the atheist empiricists and how they try to explain reality without having recourse to God. So you have to think about, if you were an atheist, I mean, just try to sort of abstract from your traditional Catholicism for a moment and think about, if you were an atheist, how would you try to give a rational account for your atheism? What would you try to do? And that's what we have to try to think about in the next 10 minutes. What sort of explanations you would try to give to sort of justify intellectually your position. What I show is that the atheists, logically, they try to turn the universe into God, but the problem is the universe won't let them. So science, in general, I mean, anybody who does science, they try to explain physical phenomena in terms of natural causes. They try to give the answer to the question, how? How does this happen? And they explain how things happen in terms of physical forces, in terms of material causes. But what atheists claim is that when they're done explaining things in terms of merely material forces, that is a complete explanation, that there is no other explanation that can be given, that it's the end of the story. The total explanation has been given when they're done giving a merely physical explanation. So they try to say that science accounts for absolutely everything that needs to be or can be explained in things. What that means for the other branches of knowledge, such as philosophy and theology, is that they explain absolutely nothing, because philosophy and theology make heavy use of ideas. They don't make heavy use of sense knowledge. You can't trace these abstract ideas back to sense knowledge directly. You can only trace them back indirectly. So these atheistic scientists, they say only sense data counts for real knowledge, therefore philosophy and theology are no good. Question, does science really explain everything? No way. I mean, of course not. For one thing, these scientists are taking a philosophical position. You know, empiricism is not a scientific position. It's a philosophical position. In other words, you don't become an empiricist by measuring things. It's not measurements that teach you to be an empiricist. It's rather a philosophy that you choose to adopt by an act of your will. But beyond that, I mean, they can't explain the origin of human concepts that are used to formulate and explain scientific theories. Scientific theories themselves are idealizations of material reality. They cannot give any reason why certain things exist and others do not. And the only thing they can do is to say that why questions are invalid questions, that they know they can't answer why questions, why do things exist as opposed to not exist. And the only thing they can do is say, well, those questions are out of bounds. You can't ask those questions. But another thing they try to do is to try to justify that science gives a total explanation. They try to pretend that science, when science has had its say, that basically their explanation of the universe shows that the universe is totally self-sufficient, that there's no need to have recourse to God in any way to explain the universe. That once physics, especially, has said all it has to say about the universe, there's no need for the God hypothesis to explain anything else. So they do this by trying to confer upon the universe the attributes of God. So in chapter 9, I try to show how they take the size of the universe and they try to show the universe is infinite in size. They try to say that the universe effectively stays absolutely the same. You know that God is immutable. God doesn't change. So they apply that to the universe. The universe doesn't change. They say that God is infinite. Well, the universe is infinite. God is simple. He's absolutely simple. They try to say that the universe is homogeneous. It's just sort of plain vanilla all across the universe. It's absolute sameness. and that the universe is uncaused, that nothing, absolutely nothing, has caused the universe. The universe is a self-existing thing, self-existing reality. This is very important for us going ahead and seeing how we would refute the atheist. We would really make the atheist uncomfortable by means of science. So I told you about how I want to empower you through this conference and give you the means to counter atheists on their own ground. All right? Because atheists generally are very bad philosophers. So it's not good to go against them with philosophy. It's very nice if you're able to go against them using science itself, which they feel is their strong ground. So they try to confer the universe, the properties of God in the universe, and therefore they're really pantheists, not really atheists, really pantheists, in the sense that they make the universe God. This view is contradicted by philosophy, but they're not philosophers and they don't really accept philosophical arguments. It's also contradicted by science. So I'm going to show you how science itself refutes them by looking at the very controversial Big Bang Theory, which, yeah, we're going to cover this very controversial topic. Because the Big Bang Theory, I'm going to show you, shows that the universe has a beginning and that it's very finite, that it's contingent, that it's obviously created by God, that the Big Bang Theory stymies atheists. It puts them in a very uncomfortable position. So just try very briefly, Einstein, he tried to imagine what the universe would be like if Maxwell's equations for light held true throughout the entire universe. And this is how scientific theories work. You create models. So he created a model of the universe. He said, if Maxwell's theories, equations for light hold true throughout the entire universe, what kind of universe would that be? And he created a model for the universe. And then he came up with these theories that match that universe. The theories of relativity, the special theory of relativity, the general theory of relativity. And what his model of the universe demanded was it demanded a universe that was finite, a universe that is expanding and so constantly changing, a universe that is also limited in space and time. So this is precisely a universe that has all the hallmarks of a created universe and not a godlike universe, a universe that has the properties of God. There was a Catholic priest who actually worked, who was a friend of Einstein. His name was Father Georges Lemaitre. He was a Belgian priest who studied at the Louvain under Cardinal Mercier, who was trying to be part of the Thomistic revival that was taking place after the pontificate of Leo XIII. And he drew some important conclusions from Einstein's theory. There's Father Lemaitre. Notice this is pre-Vatican II. He's got his cassock on. And he's got physics on the board. So he published a paper in 1927 and effectively said, look, if Einstein's theory is true, what his theory is predicting is that the universe is expanding. In other words, the heavenly bodies out there, the stars and galaxies and so on, they're not so much moving in the universe as they are moving the universe. They are stretching the universe over time. So he took that extrapolation from the Einstein's theory, and he says, look, if this is what's happening over time right now, all right, and we go back in time, what do you get? You get this. And we go back and back and back and back and back, and eventually you get to a single point that the universe would originate with a single burst of energy, which he called a primeval atom. He wrote a book entitled The Primeval Atom, hypothesizing the universe might have started in this way. So in that perspective, the entire matter/energy of our present universe, okay, so one of the aspects of Einstein's theory is that matter and energy are convertible. You know, the formula E equals mc squared. On one side of the equation, you've got energy. On the other side, you've got mass. So energy and mass are convertible. So the universe, in this idea, the universe started off in an enormously dense state at a single point, and from there expanded over a long period of time up to the present day. There was an atheist astronomer, Fred Hoyle, who in a BBC radio interview, he wanted to make fun of it. He had an opposing theory, which was called the steady state theory. The steady state theory held that the universe was completely homogeneous and effectively infinite and eternal. He called the theory the Big Bang Theory to make fun of it. Now, what I want to point out in this perspective of if you're an atheist, you want the universe to have certain properties and how the Big Bang defeats all properties. If the Big Bang Theory is true, then the universe is finite in time because it began with an initial burst of energy. If it's true, the universe is finite in space because it began with a single point and it's been expanding ever since. If it's true that the universe is forever in a state of change because it's continually getting bigger and less dense and cooler. So sometimes I take the example of a cup of coffee. If you take a cup of coffee, it's coffee restricted to a narrow space. If you take that cup of coffee and you pour it on the ground, you just toss it on the ground, you spread out the matter of that coffee, and it's going to become cooler. It's automatically going to be cooler because the matter of that is spread out. It's less dense. It's the same with the universe. Likewise, if the Big Bang Theory is true, then the universe is surely caused by God for what could possibly start the universe off in such a way with an initial burst of energy than a being who is outside of time and space, who is incredibly powerful, much like the God that we know. So if the Big Bang Theory is true, then when you go to talk with atheists, then you have a very strong argument to make on their ground. You can say, okay, you accept the Big Bang Theory, so what caused it? What set that off? And what kind of being is necessary? Would you accept the natural conclusion that your intellect makes upon having this scientific conclusion? And you can put them in a very uncomfortable position.